Hello there, my RPG lovers, and welcome to another video. Outcast games had a very turbulent history.
That's just peachy.
The first Outcast game came way back in 1999 on PC, and it had some groundbreaking features. A big open world to explore with great sense of freedom, fully voice-acted characters, first and third person perspective, and a great dialogue system with many options. That doesn't sound amazing by today's standards, but back in 1999 it was unheard of, especially for action adventures. Even though this game sold around 400,000 copies by 2002, it was considered as a failure by Atari, which was the publisher for the game. Appeal, the studio behind Outcast, requested funds from Atari to finish the work for the sequel, which was supposed to come out on PlayStation 2. This request was denied, and unfortunately, Appeal went bankrupt. It's a shame, because this game looks like it could have been amazing, judging from these clips at least. Around 2003, a fan group called Eternal Outcast had plans to develop a free sequel called Open Outcast. They initially used the Zengen for this project, the same game engine which was used for the legendary RPGs Gothic 1 and 2. But they switched engines more than a couple of times, and the project released in 2010 as a tech demo along with Crisis Wars. Their plan was to make a standalone game after that, and they eventually had to rename the game to Legacy of the Yads to avoid copyright issues, but this project was cancelled ever since. In 2014, we finally got to see signs of life from Outcast when the remastered version of the game came out as Outcast 1.1. A couple of original developers from Appeal had acquired the IP from Atari, and even though they had a Kickstarter campaign that failed, they managed to revive the franchise. This is the only version of the first game that you can buy nowadays on Steam and GOG, and the one I played recently.
Yeah, that's me.
In 2017, a remake for Outcast came out, and it was called Outcast Second Contacts. This game used the same source code, but it drastically improved pretty much all features of the game, although it also left out a few, like the first person perspective. And last, but definitely not least, we recently got to see a proper sequel for Outcast. Outcast A New Beginning released in 2024 on PC and current-gen consoles. I recently got to play all of these games, and I want to talk a little bit about their features, do some comparisons, and try to explain why Outcast franchise is a true hidden gem. Right after the sponsor of this video. RP Grand is a free-to-play mobile open-world game which can be played on any smartphone. The open world in RP Grand allows you to do whatever you want, basically. You can buy and live in your own mansion, either by yourself or with your in-game friends. Create a virtual family and enjoy building a fun life together. But this wouldn't be a role-playing game without, well, roles that you can take on. RP Grand got you covered because you can choose to be whoever you want. How about becoming a policeman, a gangster, businessman? RP Grand gives you the freedom to become whoever you want. There is also a character creation system which allows you to be creative and customize features like hairstyles, clothes and accessories. RP Grand is free and it's very easy to jump right into the game. Just be sure to use my special promo code to get an exclusive in-game gift, which is specifically reserved for my subscribers who plan to jump right into RP Grand. Download the game right now and start your brand new adventure in the open world of RP Grand. Outcast 1.1 works pretty good on modern PCs, which was not the case with the original Outcast from 1999. I managed to run this game in full HD with no technical issues, and you can even use a controller, which I did. There is a pretty lengthy intro cutscene for the game which tells you about the story and the main antagonist. I think 1.1 did a much better job than the remake when it comes to the intro cutscene. It's a live action cutscene with a lot of charm to it, while the remake had a comic-like cutscene with a bunch of static pictures. I mean, these kinds of cutscenes are totally fine in some games, but I guess I expected a bit more from the remake. It would probably take quite a bit of money to do a similar live action cutscene in the remake, and the studio had to cut corners somewhere. I mean, they came out of bankruptcy and they also had an unsuccessful Kickstarter campaign, so we can cut them some slack here. You know, because you're Cutter Slade. You're going to dislike the video, aren't you?
How ironic.
Anyway, US government has sent a probe to Adelpha, an alien world in a parallel universe. Aliens discovered the probe and they damaged it, which caused unforeseen backlash of energy. It created a black hole which threatens to destroy the Earth. A former US Navy SEAL, Cutter Slade, had to escort 3 scientists on a mission to the alien world so they can repair the probe and close the black hole. Upon arriving on Adelpha, Cutter is separated from his group, and to his surprise, the natives of Adelpha greet him with open arms. They think Cutter is like a messiah who is supposed to save them. I never played this game before, so this also took me by surprise, because I thought we were going to just go in guns blazing. But you get to interact with a lot of Talan natives and ask them a bunch of questions. Like I mentioned before, this was not so common back in the day, and in moments like this, I feel like I'm playing an RPG. Every single line of dialogue is voice acted, although I'm pretty sure there were only 1 or 2 voice actors that voiced all Talan NPCs. Still though, it's very impressive for such an old game with an open world.
Tell me about this Oka Sankar.
It is a region full of water. The city of Sayana lies around a mountain that rises high above the water there.
The voice acting seems awkward at first, but when you think about it, it makes perfect sense and it has a specific charm to it. It sounds alien, just like it should be.
I have waited for this moon since I was a small Talan to finally meet the Ulukai.
Great.
The low quality bitrate of voice acting also works in the game's favor, if you ask me. The remake from 2017 used the same voice lines from the original game, and it was kinda weird to hear that if you played the remake right after the original game. I think it doesn't work so well in the remake because I kinda expected to hear updated voice acting, which would complement the updated visuals. I don't mind it though, I'm just saying.
I do all the time, seeing them work so hard, bringing them back when they look half dead from exhaustion. It makes me upset.
Even though the visuals of this game are obviously outdated by today's standards, the game still manages to create a great atmosphere while exploring Adelpha. You can count the pixels on one hand, especially on those pointy textures, but this was very impressive back in the day. You can watch the video from Digital Foundry if you truly want to appreciate the technology behind the game. The character faces have a surprising amount of animations while they speak, the water has some great visual effects, and the maps have a very decent amount of visual variety. The remake did a wonderful job with making the world feel way better, even though it didn't look that great for a 2017 game, to be honest. But you're going to appreciate how the remake looks a lot more if you start with Outcast 1.1, like I did. Character models are also much more detailed in the remake, but it seems like they have similar, if not identical animations from the original game. Again, it's very stiff for 2017 standards, especially the animations for moving around. The reworked UI deserves some mention as well. It's recreated in a faithful way, but it's much more convenient and easier to navigate. What's not so great about the remake is the control scheme. Moving Slade around feels like driving a car with no power steering, especially in the remake. Turning around and jumping feels very awkward at first, but you shouldn't have a lot of issues with the controls, since the gameplay loop in Outcast is not very demanding. It takes a while to get used to for sure, but it's serviceable. I expected a bit more responsive controls in the remake though.
What's wrong with that?
Outcast has a nice little tutorial segment where you get to learn all basic mechanics. There are 4 different tests to take, and when you're done, you can use the portal and teleport to Shamazar, which is essentially the real beginning area. What I found interesting about these tests is that you can do them without even talking to the village elder son. You can figure everything out by yourself by just messing around with the game, and Jen will tell you that you already completed those tests. All except one, which will be the stealth test. Yeah, this game also has stealth mechanics, which are very simple, and to be honest, I didn't find it that useful later in the game. But this little minigame in the tutorial was very fun, because I failed it more than a couple of times.
Wanna try that again?
I guess you are still weak from your travels.
I find it hilarious that this game even has so many options for different situations. It's kinda insane and impressive at the same time.
It was found where you arrived, Ulukai. I meant to give it to you after our tests were complete, but I think you need it now.
I failed this test in 1.1, but I did it on my first try in the remake.
You did it! I could not see you!
You can swim and dive in this game, grab on ledges while jumping, and like I said, it has first and third person perspectives. Once you successfully finish all the tests in the tutorial, you get teleported to Shamazar, where you start meeting new Talan NPCs. The story has a nice little plot twist that I don't want to ruin. I didn't expect much from the story in this game, but I ended up liking it quite a bit. It's not amazing or anything, but it gives you a proper reason to continue progressing through the game, and the lore has a decent depth to it. Cutter Slade's personality is like an action movie star from the 80s. He's constantly making jokes and one-liners, but the natives of Adelpha can't seem to grasp the concept of irony and sarcasm.
Your father said you could help me get the kinks out.
The what?
Forget it.
Slade kept his personality in the newest game as well, but they made him a bit more believable and a bit more serious in this one.
So, which one is it?
He's still a goofball, but in the best way possible.
Spoken like a true politician.
The gameplay in Outcast is very straightforward. Your goal is to find 5 months. You also want to find out what happened to the scientist from the beginning cutscene and eventually stop the spreading of the black hole on Earth. You're either talking with friendly Talon NPCs in different locations which are separated by portals you need to find, or you're just shooting a bunch of them. You're probably going to go in guns blazing in most situations, but you can try to make use of those stealth mechanics we talked about before. You can only crouch in the remake though, you can't be prone like in the original game. It seems like NPCs have an easier time to detect you because of this, but this behavior is pretty inconsistent. The remake included a detection indicator on NPCs, which is definitely appreciated, but this doesn't exactly make the stealth much better. NPCs will immediately start attacking you, and every other hostile NPCs in the area will do the same. The enemy AI in the remake seems a bit worse compared to the original game. The bullets are very slow in the original game, which is very funny, but this also gave the game a special charm, I guess. And I didn't feel like 1.1 lacks the challenge, especially when you start teleporting to stronger locations. This game immediately opens up when you get to Shalazar, and you can technically explore everything with no restrictions. As long as you find these teleports, there are no limits on exploration, you can go wherever you want. That's not a great idea though, especially in the beginning because NPCs are noticeably stronger in locations outside of Shalazar and they use different weapons. Although as long as you have the ammo, you can handle most of them with little to no issues. It's easier said than done though because you'll find yourself without ammo in a lot of situations. Running away and coming back later is always an option. I found the cover system in 1.1 much more useful than in the remake. And the sequel almost totally disregarded this mechanic, which is kinda sad, but the gameplay in that game is way better in general. The remake also makes the shooting much faster because the bullets are not that slow. It made shooting mechanics more enjoyable and similar to most third-person shooters, but this also made the game easier in general. As you progress through the game, you'll start finding more weapons and gadgets. You can craft the ammo by visiting certain NPCs as long as you collected enough materials while exploring. The first-person perspective is not as useful as I thought it would be, so I didn't miss it that much in the remake. I would still prefer to have it though, but it's not a massive issue. The shooting mechanics obviously work a lot better in third person, and the sequel embraced this perspective completely. That will be it when it comes to 1.1 and the remake. Now let's take a look at the brand new sequel. Outcast A New Beginning is one of the most underrated action-adventure games that I recently played. It came out in 2024 for PC, PS5 and Xbox Series S and X, and it had some very mediocre reviews. I think this game has some technical issues as well, which certainly affected those reviews at least a little bit. The game has mostly positive all reviews and very positive recent reviews on Steam. All Outcast games are on GOG as well, and if you plan to buy them, I'll leave my referral links in video description and the pinned comments. The sequel is not without its issues, but it's a very solid sequel.
You leave these unidentified monsters to me.
You won't get to see similar games from big studios nowadays, especially when it comes to open world action adventures. Speaking of which, I had some technical difficulties with this game, but they were far from game breaking. I was pushing the game on 4K on my 4060 Ti, which is not so strong for 4K gaming in general. When the game works properly, the game runs in 60 FPS with DLSS, but it has a lot of frame drops, especially in populated locations full of NPCs. Nevertheless, my experience with the game was more than playable, and I will probably eliminate most of these issues if I lower the resolution. I really didn't want to do that because A New Beginning looks freaking gorgeous on high resolutions. Anyway, Cutter Slade is back, but he doesn't remember the events from previous games. Unlike previous two Outcast games, A New Beginning doesn't have an intro cutscene. Slade just has a strange vision, and once again he finds himself in Adelpha. He meets Liaz, who tells him about the prophecy of a human savior who is supposed to have some sort of a special amulet. Slade learns about the invaders who are enslaving Talan natives, and once again he's supposed to be a messiah and save the people of Adelpha. When you start pushing the story forward, you learn that Slade has a daughter now. He also finds out that these invaders are humans, which can complicate things between him and Talan, since they believe a human is a messiah. Slade's main mission is to be reunited with his daughter, but he also needs to help people of Talan to push the invaders back. Once again, the lore in the game is vast, and you can learn even more about the people of Adelpha. They included a useful option to check out what various Talan words mean in the middle of the dialogue. The world building in Outcast was always pretty good, and A New Beginning continues in the same tradition. They even try to rationalize why Slade can resurrect when he dies, and it's actually a part of the story. Come to think of it, the original game did something similar for saving your progress, which was pretty cool. Talking with characters feels much better than before for more than a couple of reasons. You will meet very interesting characters with unique personalities. The voice acting is also pretty good in general. It doesn't have the same charm like in the old game, but that would be almost impossible to replicate.
Who calls the shots around here?
I am Hiram, chief of Bida. But you got the wrong information, stranger. We don't drink Lampion shots.
Slade behaves the same, but like I mentioned before, he's a bit more believable character now. He uses sarcasm a lot, and Talan natives still fail to understand what he's trying to say.
Slade to Liaz, you copy?
I left Kizar before learning how to write. I can't copy anything, Ulukai.
The way the main story missions are designed is pretty cool. You have various quests to do before you can push the main story forward, and these activities are usually fun to do. Sometimes they can feel very similar to tedious open world activities that we can see in various open world games, but not to the same extent. They made sure to make the majority of this main quest interesting and unique. You're going to do something different every time. That's not the case with other activities on the map, since they can be very repetitive, but still a fun way to break the monotony a little bit. What has to be the best part about the sequel is the exploration. Outcast A New Beginning has some brand new features for exploring the world of Adelpha, which drastically improve the experience. This wouldn't be possible without a great map design, which has a lot of verticality. Come to think of it, that's the main thing that previous Outcast games lacked. The open world in 1.1 and the remake felt really flat, but it was still interesting to explore. A New Beginning has very vertical map design to complement some new exploration features like the jetpack. Slade's jetpack has a couple of gliding abilities, which takes the exploration to another level, literally. You don't need a lot of materials to unlock these features, which then unlocks the full potential of the exploration. When you unlock the boost for gliding, you don't even need to use the fast travel points anymore. Speaking of which, the portals are back from previous games, and they are useful in the beginning. But the game really encourages you to fly around the map, especially when you unlock the boost I mentioned. The world map doesn't feel disjointed like before, even though the map itself looks very similar like in previous games. It's one big open world, which also allows you to explore whatever you want, whenever you want. Different regions have different chain quests and they can feel very dynamic. You can complete a quest in one area and move on to the next one. Then when you come back to the previous zone, a special event will trigger from the quest you completed before. To sum up the exploration, I think this game is worth playing for the exploration itself. It's way better than a lot of open world games that came out in recent years, so even if you're not a huge fan of open worlds, I still recommend trying it. The shooting mechanics and combat in general are much better this time around. A New Beginning feels like a proper third-person shooter with some very nice features for customizing your weapons. This time around you only get 2 weapon slots, but both of them are highly customizable. The main items you're going to find throughout your journey are the weapon modifiers. These modifiers can drastically change how your guns work, and they were not afraid to have crazy combinations. You can tell they didn't care that much about balancing, but having some crazy effects like turning every projectile into a bomb can also backfire a little bit. Not that much on the game itself, but on the performance of your PC, it can get crazy. As you progress, you unlock more slots for modifiers on both weapons. But in order to use these modifiers while firing your guns, you need to have a green and red helidium that you can collect throughout the map. If it happens that you run out of helidium, your guns will fire regular bullets, which are much weaker. It's a pretty cool idea for ammo in the game. Shooting mechanics feel way better than before, but some of the features from previous games are missing. There is no first-person perspective anymore, which shouldn't be surprising because even the remake didn't have it. That doesn't matter a lot since the game introduces some great combat features. You can use the shield to block attacks or even unlock the ability to parry, which sends out a counter projectile. Your melee hits can also be improved to deal some great damage. You get these abilities by collecting another type of element, which is a bit more rare. These two skill trees are a great addition to the gameplay, even though they are not extremely deep. Clearing out these invader bases gave me some Elex vibes. Fun fact, Elex was actually heavily inspired by old Outcast games. Anyway, you usually have to defeat all enemies in these bases and activate a bunch of stuff here and there in order to shut it down. It's a simple puzzle system that works, but it's nothing to write home about. After you play it for a couple of hours, you're going to see pretty much all enemy types in the game, at least when it comes to non-boss type enemies. I never felt bored while shooting things in this game, even though the enemy variety is not so great. Those weapon modifiers I mentioned is the main thing which keeps the shooting interesting. It always feels great when you discover new modifiers while exploring the map, although I would like to see an armor system in this game. Maybe for the sequel, but I'm not sure we're going to see another Outcast game. A New Beginning didn't actually sell so well, at least judging by Steam numbers. We don't have a clue how many copies it sold on consoles. According to some reports, A New Beginning performed below management expectations, unfortunately. I really hope to see another Outcast game because it can be amazing if they take everything what made The New Beginning great and just build upon it.
Now that's more like it.
To sum things up, I can't recommend this game enough. It's a great open world action adventure with a simple but very enjoyable gameplay loop. I actually recommend starting with 1.1 Outcast if you can handle the old age of the game. If not, well, at least try out the remake first before you jump into the sequel. You will appreciate the sequel a lot more if you do so.
What's wrong with that?
And that will be it for this video. I never played Outcast games before I decided to make this video, so they were a very pleasant surprise. I'm a brand new fan of this series and I can't wait to clock in more hours in the sequel, but I also want to replay previous games as well, eventually. It's a very underrated action-adventure franchise that's a bit rough around the edges, but very fun nonetheless.
Great.
Did you play any of these games before? Leave a comment down below. Be sure to subscribe if you enjoyed the video. You can also support me by becoming a YouTube member or a Patreon. I also have some cool t-shirts and hoodies in the theme of the channel, so check that out as well. Huge thanks to all of my current supporters, and I'll see you in the next one.